Hey friends, Matt here, and in this video what I want to do is show you a really cool and simple way that you can really easily create your own riser sounds inside of Ableton Live. This works in absolutely any edition of Ableton Live 12. As long as you have the CC control device and the expression control device, you're good to go. Let's dive right in and show you how this works. Okay, so first up, let's just show you a quick example of the type of sound that you can create using this method. Here I've got just a sound that I've created in Ableton Live, and it sounds like this. So you might think that to create a complex sound like this, you might need a lot of, say, lanes of automation or something like that. But as we can see, if I open up the automation lane, we actually only have a single line of automation. And that's what makes this method super powerful, is that it only requires a single linear line of automation as opposed to lots of weird, complicated automation lanes going on, but we still get a lot of control over the movement of the different effects. So let me show you how to do this for yourself. Here on this second MIDI track, all I'm gonna do is just create an 8-bar long MIDI clip. This could be as long as you want it to be, but let's just go 8 bars for the moment. Command Shift M, and now let's just add in a single long MIDI note. This could be on any note. I'm gonna go on C3, double click and extend this to the entire length of the 8-bar long MIDI clip. So now what we need to do is add some kind of sound making device to this MIDI track. I'm gonna use Drift in this example because it's available in every single edition of Ableton Live, but you could use basically any synthesizer that you wanted. So let's go ahead and add Drift to this MIDI track. And now we have a sound that sounds just like a Drift playing a single note. Pretty uninspiring. But now what we're gonna do is add the CC control MIDI effect in order to create a pitch bend for this particular sound. So I'm gonna go ahead and add CC control. Next, in order to get the kind of pitch rising effect, I'm gonna automate this pitch bend control to go from all the way down the bottom to all the way up the top. To do this, let's just right click the pitch bend control, show the automation in a new lane, select the entirety of the 8-bar range, right click, and select the rising ramp up shape here. Now we get that same synth sound, instead it's rising in pitch. And now this is where we get to set basically how far we want this to rise in terms of pitch. So depending on the synthesizer you're using, you might have a different pitch bend range, but here inside of Drift, if I go to the bottom right, we can see this pitch bend range or PB range option. I'm gonna increase this all the way up to 12 semitones. And so now with the pitch bend wheel, we can go from 12 semitones below the note that we have input, all the way up to 12 semitones above the note that we've input. So it gives us effectively a 2-octave range that we can slide between with the pitch bend control. So now if I play this same note, we get a rising pitch effect over the course of this 8 bars. Now, of course, if you want a riser that doesn't necessarily rise in pitch, you don't need to worry about the pitch bend range, but for the moment, we're gonna kind of play around with this idea of rising in pitch over the course of the 8 bars. And so now comes the really fun part. We're gonna use the expression control device to modulate parameters inside of the Drift synthesizer and on audio effects after the Drift synthesizer, whilst only having the pitch bend be the actual thing that is automated over the course of the 8 bars. So let's go ahead and add the expression control device after the CC control device and before the Drift. And if you don't know what the expression control device does, I have a whole video on it which you can check out via the card above. I'll also leave a link in the description. But essentially what it allows us to do is modulate any parameter inside of our session with incoming MIDI data on the track that the expression control device is on. And this includes pitch bend information. So let's collapse this CC control device just by double clicking. And now let's go ahead and in this first tab on the expression control device that currently says velocity, let's change the source to pitch bend. And now what I can go ahead and do is map the movement or the increase of the pitch bend wheel to any of the parameters I want inside the Drift synthesizer. So for example, I might want to map it to the filter cutoff for the low pass filter. Let's go ahead and click on this map button, then click on the parameter I want to modulate, which is this frequency control. And now we can see a little blue dot has appeared here. Now what's cool about this way of working is that I still get access to control this particular parameter. In fact, I could even automate it if I wanted to, but that gets a little bit more complicated. For the moment, let's just pull this basically down all the way, maybe to around 50 Hertz. And let's go to the output range in our expression control and increase this all the way to 100%. And now what's gonna happen is as the pitch bend control increases, so too is the low pass filter going to increase on our Drift synthesizer. Now, currently this is basically just exactly the same as if I automated this in a linear fashion, but where this can get really cool is that I can actually bend or curve the movement or the modulation of this low pass filter. And I can do this just by going to the expression control device here and just clicking up or down on this line in the center. And we can see this basically curves the movement of this low pass filter frequency across the course of this 8 bars, or just across the course of time that the pitch bend wheel is being automated. So let's leave it a little bit more like this, where it's curved down. And just to reset things a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and double click on this envelope 2 frequency mod here so that we have a filter that starts completely closed. And let's go ahead and modulate some other parameters inside of the synthesizer. First up, let's go to the mode section, change this to unison, and I wanna increase the unison detune percentage over the course of this 8 bars as well. Let's go ahead and go to the second tab in the expression control, change the source here to pitch bend, and now map this to that unison percentage, and then we can play around with the output range to our taste. So the low pass filter starts a little bit low. So in this case, all I'm gonna do is just increase the filter frequency here. Let's also increase the level of oscillator 1 a little bit. And now let's have oscillator 2 increase in level over time as well. So let's go to the third tab, set this to pitch bend, map this to the level of oscillator 2. And then I wanna set the maximum level for oscillator 2 to be at 0 dB, type 0 and press enter. And now, because I want this to go from lower up to 0 dB, I'm actually going to go into this expression control device here and just move around this curve here so that it goes from high down to low, and also change the output range to be negative. So this goes now from a lower value to a higher value on the level of the oscillator 2 here. Let's change oscillator 2 to a sawtooth wave, and let's also change the release of the drift synthesizer all the way down to 10 milliseconds, increase the sustain all the way up so we get a more sustained sound over the course of this 8 bars. And now let's go ahead and modulate 2 more parameters of this drift synthesizer with the expression control device. Firstly, let's modulate the level of the noise oscillator so that it increases over time. Let's go ahead to this second to last tab, again, change this to pitch bend, map this to the noise oscillator, except this time, instead of just playing around with this default curve, I'm actually going to switch to this secondary curve. And now we get a little bit more control over how this parameter is modulated over time, because we now have a midpoint that we can move around inside this XY pad here. So I can have it so that there's basically no noise for the first half of the sound, and then the noise begins to increase in level over the second half of the sound. Let's increase the output range of this expression control and have a listen to our result. Lastly, let's go ahead and modulate the high pass filter of the drift synthesizer as well. So let's switch to the final tab on the expression control device, set the source once again to pitch bend, and now map this to the high pass filter. And again, let's change this so that we have this more split curve by clicking on this button right here. And now I can click and drag this midpoint so that this high pass filter basically doesn't engage until really near the end of the sound. And then I can actually curve the last bit just by clicking and dragging down. Now, as a side note, by curving the curve this way, we actually do curve both halves. If you want to unlink this curvature in both halves so that we have separate curving in the different halves of the curve, we can just click this little link button here to unlink the left and right sides of this curve. So let's drag this all the way back down to the bottom, increase the output range a little bit, and now have a listen to our result. So you could hear there that the high pass filter was actually increasing towards the end of the sound. I might increase this a little bit more on the output range, but you kind of get the idea. Now it's worth noting that of course this isn't limited to just modulating parameters inside of the synthesizer. We can also modulate effects and parameters of those effects that we have after that synthesizer to create even more complex and interesting riser sounds. And the beauty of this is that we can have as many expression control devices as we want, modulating as many parameters as we want across not only a single track in our session, but multiple tracks in our session as well, if we want to. By the way, I wanted to let you all know that I'm launching a new monthly membership model where you can get access to things like monthly exclusive tutorial videos, exclusive live workshops, and even one-on-one sessions with me. You'll find more information in the description. Or if you're not up for spending any money, you can just sign up to my newsletter to stay in the loop. There's a link for that in the description as well. So I've gone ahead here and added a few audio effects after the synthesizer on this track, and then another expression control device to automate different parameters of these effects. I've got the dry wet of this saturator being modulated, the center frequency and the feedback of this phaser flanger, and the gain of this MTM simple gain, which you can get as part of my simple bundle here as well. And if we go to the expression control device, we can see that a bunch of these also have some curvature applied to them to give it a little bit more interest. And now we have something that sounds like this. Now, the last really awesome thing about this way of working is that the length of the riser sound is completely determined by the length of just a single line of automation, which is that pitch bend control. For example, say I didn't want this riser to be 8 bars long, I wanted it to be 4 bars long instead. All I'd need to do is just simply click and drag this automation line back so that it's 4 bars long instead of 8 bars. I can even make it 2 bars long. Or I could even make it 16 all the way up to 32 bars long, or even longer or shorter if I wanted to, whatever the length. All I need to do is just automate this pitch bend parameter across the range of time that I want. And then all of the parameters that I've modulated with the expression control device will stay in sync with that automation. And so hopefully this video gave you some ideas and inspiration to go out and try this for yourself. If you'd like to get access to the sounds and the project file that I showcased in this video, I'll make it available to my members. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Check out this video right here to learn some more about the expression control device. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you all in the next video.